Have you ever wondered how to even create a calendar to keep yourself organized with your gardening? Well, you're in luck because in this video, I'm going to show you my process and what I do to actually plan my year for my garden. So when you have a limited time to devote to your garden, it's really easy for your weekends to turn into a never-ending marathon of gardening tasks. So today I thought I'd show you how to create a gardening calendar every single year. This helps me feel a lot more organized and in control of all of the tasks that I have to do in my garden. As I said, this is the way that I personally plan out my garden calendar. There's many ways to do it, so find the one that works best for you and go with it. Whichever way you choose, by putting a little bit of work into your schedule right now, you're going to be able to get your weekends back as well as create more time and space to actually enjoy your garden rather than constantly working on it. And the best part is that it's totally customizable to fit any of your needs, whether you're just a flower gardener or you do vegetables or a little of both. So here are the 5 steps that I use to create my gardening calendar. Step 1 is to create a list of gardening goals. Step 2 is to determine the dates that my gardening season starts and ends. Step 3 is to create a growing list of plants and vegetables that I want to grow that particular year. And then 4th, I break down my year into different quote unquote seasons, not necessarily spring, summer, fall, winter, but the gardening seasons and what types of things I'll be doing within that season. And number 5 is to create a to-do list for each of the seasons that we set up. So let's get into this. So first we're going to create a list of gardening goals. And when you're creating your goals, you should be brainstorming and dreaming big and small with those goals. So think about all the things you want to accomplish throughout the gardening season and brainstorm a big old list of ideas. This is a really fun part. You may have big goals like building a new backyard patio or starting your first vegetable garden or planting a large native wildflower meadow. And if you have those larger goals like that, I find it easier to use a full sheet to plan each one of those goals and then break that bigger goal into smaller goals. So maybe for a wildflower meadow, you'd have picking out the wildflowers that you're going to use in it, and then when you're going to plant those and just the maintenance tasks that would go along with that, or even preparing the land before you plant. You should also consider these smaller goals that you want to accomplish, like maybe getting 2 harvests of tomatoes instead of 1 this year, or providing food and shelter for pollinators, or grow enough cut flowers to harvest the world's best bouquet for Mother's Day. I mean, that's a pretty cool goal, but it is like a smaller task that I don't think that you need so much room to think through. So for my smaller goals, I just list them on one page so I don't forget what they are. The next step in developing this calendar is to determine the dates your gardening season starts and ends. And this is something that is really important, but I think that a lot of people don't think about, like, okay, what's the first day of my season? What's the last day of my season? And how would I actually even go about figuring that out? Well, I go by frost dates. There's a couple different ways that you can do this, but in order to create a plan and to know when you need to perform certain tasks, it's good to know the frost dates. The frost date is basically the average date of the first or last light freeze that occurs in spring or fall. And how do you figure this date out, this magical date? Well, Farmer's Almanac does it for you. So on their website, there's a frost date calendar, and basically you'll just have to put in your city and state or your zip code, and it's going to give you like the average time that the last spring frost happens, the average time that the first fall frost date happens, and it'll also give you the actual length in a number of days of your growing season, which is really important to know, especially if you want to kind of plan out different harvests and things like that, so you can space them out and know that you're going to be able to fit them in within that gardening schedule or the length of your gardening season. Just keep in mind that these frost days, they're estimations. It's just a guide to get you started, and there's like so many factors that go into frost. Farmer's Almanac is a pretty good resource for this type of thing, but even they say that their calculator is only accurate 70% of the time. So you have to keep that in mind when you're putting out a plan. So I like to either add or subtract like a week or two from the frost dates. That's one way to go about it. So if it says that your last spring frost happens March 1st. Maybe don't actually start planting until March 7th or March 14th, just to be safe. If you don't want to do that and you want to get the most out of those particular dates, what you can do is just make sure that you're ready for if it does happen to frost, like have the materials on hand to cover and protect your plants, and just make sure that you're ready for that. If you live in a warmer area without any frost, you'll have to modify the method that I use, but it's really pretty easy to do. Instead of using frost dates as your guide, like us cold weather folks, you'll probably want to center your gardening tasks around the hottest time of year. So for us, we can't, in the north, we can't garden when it's winter because everything's frozen. But people down south, I think that you may have issues gardening in the hottest time of the year. So maybe that would be June, July for you. I'm not really sure. So what you can do, I call this like the heat wave. So the start of that heat wave, so say it starts June 1st, that's kind of like the last day of your gardening season. So when the heat wave's over and it's nice and cool, that's like kind of like when you start a new season. So you just sort of use that heat wave as like the gap in between the two seasons. And then you kind of have an idea of like, okay, my gardening season starts on this day and then it ends on this day. And then from there, you can use the same principles I'm using in my calendar to plan your own calendar. So the next step that we're going to do is to create a growing list of your plants and your vegetables for the year. So we've created some goals, and now we're going to get on to actual just lists of things we want to plant. So when you're creating a gardening calendar, it's helpful to decide what you want to grow ahead of time. So brainstorm that list, use your seed packets and or your experience to put in the sow dates and the germination periods of your plants and vegetables. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's totally fine. If you're just gardening, if you're just a flower gardener, I don't think this is as important. I think it's kind of an important step though if you want to do any kind of vegetable gardening and get the most out of your season. So a handy resource that you can use for this is the Farmer's Almanac. Again, they have a vegetable planting calendar, and I'm going to put all these links in the description below this video as well. So all you do is put in your city and state or your zip code, and it's going to tell you exactly when you'll need to sow each vegetable. In fact, it gives you dates to start sowing indoors, when to plant seedlings or transplants, and dates to start your outdoor sowing. It's like such a helpful resource. And it also gives you dates if you garden not based on these frost dates, but like moon dates. I'm not super familiar with that, but they do give dates for that as well. So once you know all of these numbers, you're going to be able to work backwards to determine when to sow your plant's second or third crop. So knowing these dates ahead of time is going to give you even more harvest cycles in your growing season. It's going to just let you make the most out of all of this. So the next step we're going to do is break the year into different gardening quote-unquote seasons, like I said before. I find it really helpful to divide them into seasons because it sort of divides the year for me, and I can focus on different things at different times of the year. So the particular seasons that I use to plan out my tasks are preseason, early season, mid-season, late season, and post-season. So I'm going to go through these, and again, this is all something that you can modify to fit your own needs, but this is just what I do. So in the pre-season, this is the time for tasks that I do to prepare for the season before it starts. So this is before I can actually go outside and do much of anything. It's what kind of tasks would I do to get ready so that the first day of the season, I'm all ready to go. The next thing is the early season. So in this section, I put all of the tasks that are dependent upon the start of the growing season, i.e. My last spring frost date. So if there's anything that I have to do like a week before that frost date, or on that last frost date, or a week after that last frost date, I put all of those in this early season calendar. And then I do a mid-season, and I save this section of my particular calendar for tasks that aren't attached to a spring or fall frost date. They're just sort of the things that are all in between those dependent days. And a lot of these tasks for me in particular are like recurring things like staying on top of weeds, or maybe plant sales, or things going on that I need to take care of at certain times of the year that aren't really attached to these beginning and end of the season dates. For the late season, these are any tasks that are dependent upon the end of the growing season. Just like in the spring and the fall, you're going to have the frost date. So what do I have to do before it frosts? Like there's a bunch of tasks. And then right after it frosts, there might be things I need to do as well. And then finally, post season, this is like the end of the season when it's starting to get colder and it's too cold to garden anymore. So these are the tasks that I list that give me closure for the season and ensure that my next pre-season is really nice and easy to do. So last, I think this is last. I hope it's last. This feels like a whole lot of stuff that I'm talking about here, but I'm just trying to go through my entire process to maybe give you some ideas. So in this section, I create to-do lists for each season that I just explained. And no matter what season of gardening you're in, there's always something to do. So list all the tasks that you need to do to get your plants growing and your goals accomplished throughout the season. So some ideas that I'd consider for your calendar are any tasks that will help you to accomplish the goals, the big goals and the small goals that you set right in the beginning here. Make sure that you're incorporating all of the pieces of those goals into your calendar so by the end of the year you can look back and say, oh wow, I actually got that whole thing done. That's great. Any equipment or tools that you need to maintain, like changing the oil in your lawnmower or sharpening the mower blades or cleaning up your tools and things like that. Anything that you may need to buy, like you need to restock on fertilizer or get some compost or mulch or things like that. And then all the dates for sowing and harvesting seeds and things like that. So I've created a free download with example tasks for all the seasons. So basically you can just download for free my whole gardening calendar and like as I use it. And you can use it as is, or you can kind of add, I gave some spaces at the bottom so that you can add your own things to it to sort of modify it. So you can grab that. It's over at prettypurpledoor.com/gardening-calendar. Again, I'll put the link in the description below. And I also wanted to share that I have a full gardening calendar workbook, and it's available at prettypurpledoor.com/shop, link in description. This is a full workbook, so it's not just like a list of all of the things that I do. It's actually a lot of really cool blank pages that you can use to sort of dream up and plan your own garden. So if you like the sort of process and my thinking in all of this, you could use that workbook to kind of make it your own and put your own things into that calendar. It's super helpful. I think you'll really like it. I also have garden planning online courses, so if you're really into gardening, you should check those out too, because they take a deep dive into how to create your dream landscape. All the links that I mentioned in this video are in the description below, and I'll see you over in the next video.